Remember the little robot from the movie WALL-E? In my opinion, it was one of the best movies Disney's ever created. And that's not because of its superbly animated cinematography or its engaging plotline, but because of its reality. The story revolves around a world filled with garbage, with the main character, a robot, whose sole mission is to compress rubbish and create enough space for humans to come back on Earth. After 700 years, and considering our world's already escalating situation about large amounts of garbage, that could easily be our future. Yeah, pretty intense for a Disney movie, right? Our Earth only has so much space to give. No matter how much we produce, consume, there is a certain extent until we run out of room. And that's the problem. You see, because then limited space means limited things. Things such as items, material. And we, as humans, don't produce things depending on what we need. We produce depending on what we want. We overproduce, meaning that we make too much of everything. For example, guess how many chickens there are in the world? I know it's a rather odd example and an equally bizarre picture, but just try to imagine a figure in your head, or talk to your neighbor around you. Okay. Got a number? Now, the answer, 50 billion. Per year. Well, try comparing that to the 8 billion humans who live in our world. We might even have a chicken revolution sometime. But I'm not here to talk about chickens or movies for that matter. I'm here to talk about overproduction. And instead of offering you a very fancy solution to the problem, all I can suggest are a few simple methods of thinking that can help change your life. The methods that I'm presenting may also have been mentioned to you by some other people, but we need to understand this as a society. There's a difference between a want and a need. Yes, I know it's hard not to give in. I want the new AirPods too also, I admit it. We all want more, even though most of us already have what we need. And that's the real problem. Since most companies nowadays produce more, and people have more than what they need, people buy extra products as wants, which leads to an overcrowding of extra useless items that we don't even need. You see, it's like a scale balance. The more we produce and consume, the less space we have. The more space we take up, the less space there is for things that actually matter. Things such as our growing population, the safe and clean environment of our well-being, our very own future. For instance, why is there global warming? Due to the excess greenhouse gases which we produce that break down the ozone layer. Landfills, traffic, plastic floating islands, and more are all results of overproduction. Slowly, all of this will lead to the consumption of our whole Earth, with only very little attention being paid to it. Another reason for this problem is that often companies don't realize the impact of producing extra items on our well-being. After all, companies mainly exist to make a profit. Often, they overproduce items in an effort to make money, but end up having extras, which they then try to get rid of or recycle. Now, recycling in itself is a very helpful environmental action, but it should be the last resort. We know this from our 3 R's, right? Reduce, reuse, and at last, recycle. Now, before I continue on a ranting spree, I'm just trying to say I'm not here to criticize companies. All I'm trying to do is provide different methods. Also, I want to be a businesswoman in the future. My thinking is just a little bit more simpler. Why don't more companies start to produce depending on the number of orders they get? That's known as a BTO strategy, build to order. Now, I agree, this production may cause some delays, and sometimes customers may not be willing to wait, but it helps the company by saving costs and also saves the environment by producing less items, which saves the need to recycle, cut down production, and etc. Another way to solve this problem is that companies don't have to produce similar items. Make one item good, produce that more, or make the design of a product simple. Now, of course, many companies in the world have already thought about the pros and cons of this method, but cannot instantly change their production line, because each company has different factors at stake. Nonetheless, companies should try and think about the future. In fact, many already have. Examples of this are H&M and Nike. H&M introduced a zero-waste policy, in which they ask customers to return products they don't want. These products are then taken and created into new clothing. Additionally, Nike has started using recycled polyester in their new sustainable line. This alternate way of thinking is what is changing the world, and is exactly the type of thinking that each human being should have imprinted in his or her own head. A different approach to solving the problem for companies is that they should try to produce their items depending on the value they want their product to have, not price. Let me break it down just a little bit. Each product that a person buys has some value, right? That's why it has a price tag and even costs you money, because someone, somewhere, has put effort into making that product, and you are paying for the effort when you're buying it. Now, if a company starts to overproduce items, then the price of the items will go down, despite the value of and effort being put into the product staying the same. In fact, the company itself will lose an advantage over the market, because if you produce a few items which are really good and have a limited stock, then the price of that item would go up as the value will go up. The richer the company would get. It's the exact opposite if a company overproduces. Now, however, a problem that often occurs is that most companies find it easier to achieve profit by producing cheaper items on a larger scale. Additionally, in LEDCs, companies need to produce items at a cheaper rate if they want to achieve a profit, as average person spending in LEDCs, less economically developed countries, would be lower in comparison to MEDCs, more economically developed countries. But unfortunately, we can't fix everything. Our world faces a million problems every day, and we don't have the time or energy to focus on all of them. And so, instead of trying to solve the big picture all at once, we have to try and solve the small problem. The small problem being what we as humans buy. Look, I know that the latest new smartphone has its cool new features, but do you really need it if you already have a functioning phone? People are a vital part of solving this problem. We need to understand what we're buying and be conscious shoppers, not impulsive. Impulsive shopping may seem helpful and maybe even satisfying at that moment, but isn't good for us or for the environment in the long run. Any person, in fact, either a shopper or a producer, should aim to help the environment by truly understanding and thinking about the consequences of their actions. Now, what I mentioned was just one of the ways to solve the problem, and there are many other ways. Many solutions are out there for companies, just like the ones that I mentioned to you. But I have a very, very simple solution for you all. And before I continue, it's not to stop buying things. That's not a good strategy, by the way. All I'm asking you to do the next time you're thinking about buying a product you want is just to take a step back and see whether you really need this item. Is it necessary? Can you do without it? Is it vital for any reason? Because if it's not, then you are not compelled to buy it. Leave it behind, buy something better later, because it makes more sense to have one thing that's worth a lot to you rather than a bunch of useless other things. And because you can save the world one step at a time, no matter how cliche it sounds, by not buying it. Would you rather change your ways now or let the world slowly deteriorate? Because it is inevitable. Wall-E can't do it. Thank you.